The girl used to believe that home was the safest place in the world. When her mother was alive, the house was small, but full of warmth. There was laughter, simple meals, and soft bedtime talks. Her mother never had much money, but she had love, and that love filled every corner of the house. The girl was still very young when sickness slowly took her mother away. At first, no one told her how serious it was. They said her mother would get better. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into silence. One quiet morning, her mother never woke up again. After that day, the house felt empty. Her father tried his best to stay strong for her. He worked longer hours and came home tired, but he always made sure she ate and slept on time. He became both parents for her. Even when he was exhausted, he listened to her stories and helped with her schoolwork. The girl loved her father deeply and trusted him completely. She believed that as long as he was there, everything would be okay. A year later, her father told her he was thinking about remarrying. He said the new woman would help take care of the house and bring balance back into their lives. The girl did not fully understand, but she nodded because she trusted her father. When the stepmother moved in, she smiled a lot in the beginning. Her voice was soft, and she spoke kindly in front of others. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and told neighbors how much she cared about the child. For a short time, the girl thought things might be fine. But slowly, very slowly, things began to change. When the father was not around, the stepmother's smile disappeared. Her voice became sharp. Small mistakes were treated like big crimes. If the girl spilled water, she was scolded. If she asked a question, she was told to stay quiet. The stepmother often said the girl was a burden, that she ate too much and cost too much. At first, the girl thought she had done something wrong. She tried harder to be good. She woke up early, cleaned the house, and stayed out of the way. Her father noticed some changes, but did not see the full picture. He was often tired and distracted. The stepmother acted caring whenever he was near. She complained softly about how difficult it was to raise a child alone all day. She said the girl was stubborn and ungrateful. The father, already stressed, believed her words more than the silence of his daughter. The girl learned quickly that speaking up only made things worse. Days became heavy. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place where she had to walk carefully, speak carefully, and breathe carefully. Sometimes the stepmother would forget to give her food. Other times, she would give her leftovers while serving herself full meals. When the girl asked for help with school, she was told she was not smart enough to understand anyway. The girl missed her mother deeply. At night, she would lie awake hugging her old pillow, wishing her mother could come back. She whispered her fears into the darkness, hoping someone was listening. She promised herself she would survive, no matter how lonely it felt. Then her father started getting sick. At first, it was small things. He came home earlier than usual, coughing and looking weak. He lost weight and slept more. The stepmother complained about the medical bills and said he was becoming useless. The girl tried to help him whenever she could. She brought him water, adjusted his pillow, and stayed by his side. He would smile weakly at her and tell her everything would be okay. But his condition worsened quickly. One night, he was taken to the hospital. The girl waited outside the room, scared and confused. The stepmother barely looked at her. When the doctor came out, the news was not good. Her father passed away quietly, leaving the girl's world shattered once again. At the funeral, stepmother cried loudly in front of people. She spoke about her loss and how hard life would be now. People comforted her and praised her strength. The girl stood silently, her heart breaking. No one noticed her tears. No one asked how she felt. After the funeral, everything changed for the worse. The stepmother stopped pretending. She told the girl clearly that she was no longer wanted. She said the house belonged to her now and that the girl had no place there. The girl was shocked. She begged, reminding her of her father, of promises, of family. But the stepmother's face was cold. She said she did not sign up to raise someone else's child. From that day on, the girl was treated like a stranger. She was made to sleep on the floor. She was given chores from morning till night. If she complained, she was threatened. The stepmother often said she would throw her out if she did not behave. Fear lived inside the girl constantly. One evening, after a small mistake, the stepmother lost her patience. She shouted loudly, blaming the girl for all her problems. She accused her of bringing bad luck into the house. The girl stood there, shaking, unable to defend herself. Then the stepmother said words that would change her life forever. She told the girl to pack her things and leave. The girl had no idea where to go. She had no relatives nearby and no money. She begged to stay, even if it meant sleeping outside the house. But the stepmother pushed her toward the door. She threw her small bag onto the ground and locked the door behind her. The sun was setting. The air was cold. The girl stood there, staring at the door, hoping it would open again. It didn't. She walked away slowly, each step heavy. Her heart felt empty. She did not cry at first. She was too shocked. She walked until the streets became unfamiliar. People passed by without noticing her. Cars moved fast. The world felt huge and unsafe. As night fell, fear finally took over. She found a quiet corner near an old building and sat down, hugging her knees. Tears rolled down her face silently. She wondered what she had done wrong to deserve this life. She wondered if anyone would ever care again. That night, the girl fell asleep hungry and scared, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. This was the end of her old life and the painful beginning of a new journey, one filled with hardship, but also with a hope she had not yet met. The girl woke up shivering. Her small body curled into itself on the cold ground. The street was quiet, except for the occasional sound of distant cars and barking dogs. She rubbed her eyes, hoping it was all a nightmare, but the harsh reality of the night before pressed down on her. Her stepmother's words echoed in her head. "You are not wanted here. Leave." Those words were sharp, cutting deeper than any pain she had ever felt. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. She had no home now, no warm bed, no familiar smells of food or comfort. Her bag held a few tattered clothes, a notebook, and a small photograph of her father. She hugged the photograph to her chest, feeling a wave of sorrow and longing. She wanted to go back, to knock on the door, to ask for one more chance, but she knew it was useless. The stepmother would never let her return. The girl took a deep breath and started walking, not knowing where to go, only knowing she had to move. The streets were harsh. People passed by without a glance. Some stared, some whispered, some ignored her completely. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she ignored it, thinking it was a small price to pay compared to being kicked out. She looked at the shops and restaurants, imagining what it would feel like to eat freely, but she didn't dare enter. Fear and shame kept her at the edge. Hiding her face from anyone who might ask questions, days turned into nights, and nights into a blur. She found empty corners to sleep in, under stairs, behind old buildings, sometimes in small parks. The cold seeped into her bones. Rain poured on her tiny shelter one night, soaking her clothes and leaving her shivering. She learned quickly how to survive on the streets, how to avoid dangerous people, how to find small scraps of food, and how to stay unnoticed. Hunger became a constant companion, and loneliness a shadow that followed her everywhere. Despite everything, the girl never lost her heart. She helped others whenever she could, even when she had nothing. She shared the small bread she found with younger children in the streets. She comforted those who cried in the dark corners like she did. People noticed her kindness sometimes, but mostly she remained invisible. She learned to smile softly when someone looked her way, but it never reached her eyes. Inside, she carried the weight of sadness and fear. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a small market. Vendors shouted their prices, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. The girl's stomach growled, and her mouth watered at the sight of warm food. She didn't have money, but she couldn't help looking. A kind old woman noticed her standing at the edge, hesitant. She offered her a small piece of bread, wrapped in paper. The girl hesitated, then took it with trembling hands. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, tears threatening to fall. The old woman smiled gently and patted her head before returning to her stall. It was the first act of kindness she had received in a long time. The girl continued her days in this way, searching for food, finding corners to sleep, and trying not to cry in front of strangers. She avoided the police, knowing they might send her to a shelter, which she feared more than the streets. She watched other children who had families, envying them silently. Sometimes she tried to go back to her father's old neighborhood, hoping someone might remember her, but everything had changed. The stepmother had told neighbors she no longer lived there, and no one seemed to care about a small abandoned girl. One night, she found herself near a quiet alley, where a group of older boys were drinking and laughing. They noticed her and started teasing, trying to scare her. Her heart pounded and fear froze her in place. But then, she remembered her father's words. Be brave. Even when no one is watching, gathering all her courage, she looked at them and said quietly, "Please leave me alone." Her voice was small but firm. The boys laughed at first, then shrugged and walked away. The girl breathed heavily, amazed that she had defended herself. She realized that even in the darkest moments, she had strength she never knew. Time passed slowly. She learned to beg just enough to survive without drawing too much attention. She cleaned small tables at food stalls for a few coins. Sometimes she carried bags for shopkeepers. It was hard, exhausting work, but it kept her alive. She met other children who were homeless, some older, some younger. They shared tips, scraps of food, and stories of survival. They laughed when they could and cried when they couldn't. For a moment, she felt a sense of belonging, even among the lost and forgotten. Yet, she never forgot her father or the life she had lost. She clutched his photograph each night, whispering stories to him as if he could hear. She promised him she would survive, she would grow strong, and she would one day live a life full of love. The promise became her anchor, keeping her moving forward even when the world seemed cold and merciless. One evening, after a long day of searching for food, she found a quiet park bench under a dim street lamp. She sat down, exhausted, and watched the world around her. A stray dog came near, shivering, and she held out her hand. The dog cautiously approached, and she shared the last piece of bread she had managed to find. The dog wagged its tail, and she smiled, feeling a small spark of warmth in her heart. Even in the harshest times, small acts of kindness reminded her that not all the world was cruel. Days turned into weeks. Her clothes became more tattered, her hair more unkempt, but her spirit, though weary, remained alive. She learned to read the weather, to find places where people would not chase her away, and to keep her few belongings safe. She became quiet, observing the world, learning how to avoid danger, and how to make small connections with people who could help without asking questions. She became clever, cautious, and surprisingly independent for her age. One day, while wandering near the edge of the city, she saw a wealthy-looking man sitting in a park, feeding birds. He noticed her staring and smiled gently. The girl felt nervous, but there was something kind in his eyes that made her approach cautiously. He did not speak harshly or look annoyed. Instead, he offered her some bread from his bag and asked her name softly. The girl hesitated, then whispered it. The man nodded, listened to her story in silence, and gave her a warm blanket. It was the first real warmth she had felt in months. The girl did not know it yet, but that encounter marked a turning point. For the first time, she realized that not all people were cruel or selfish, that even in a world where she had been abandoned and left to survive alone, there were kind hearts willing to notice her, to help her, and maybe, just maybe, to change her life forever. As night fell, she curled up under the blanket, feeling the chill fade slightly. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of a life where she was safe, where she was loved, and where no one would ever tell her she did not belong. And as she drifted to sleep, holding on to that tiny spark of hope, she didn't know that the journey ahead would bring more challenges, but also a chance at a life she had never imagined possible. The girl woke up to the soft light of dawn, filtering through the cracks of the abandoned building where she had spent the night. The chill of the early morning air made her shiver, but she wrapped herself tightly in the thin blanket she had managed to keep safe. Hunger was gnawing at her stomach, but she had learned to ignore it when there was no food. She rubbed her eyes and tried to push away the memories of the cold, the rain, and the harsh words that had pushed her out of her home. Survival had become her only focus. She stepped out into the street, feeling the rough pavement beneath her bare feet. The city was waking up slowly. Shopkeepers were opening their stores, and the smell of fresh bread mixed with the exhaust from cars. She wandered near a busy street, hoping to find something to eat or a small job that could earn her a few coins. Her eyes caught sight of a little girl, crying by a bench, clutching a torn doll. The girl's heart ached. She remembered herself, alone, cold, and frightened. She went over, knelt beside the little one, and gave her a small piece of bread she had saved. The little girl looked up, eyes wide, and whispered a thank you. It was such a small moment, yet it filled the girl with warmth. Later that day, she wandered near a park she had never explored before. It was quiet, almost peaceful compared to the chaos of the city streets. She found a spot under a large tree and sat down, tired from walking and searching. Her stomach growled again, but she tried to focus on the gentle rustling of the leaves. She did not notice the man sitting on the other side of the park at first. He was older, well-dressed, and had a calm presence that made him seem different from the hurried people around him. He was feeding birds, scattering crumbs from a small bag onto the ground. The girl watched him from a distance, curious but hesitant to approach. After a while, the man noticed her. His eyes were kind, not judging, not questioning, just observing. He patted the ground beside him, inviting her to come closer. The girl froze, unsure if she should trust him. Fear had been her constant companion for so long that the idea of kindness felt strange. Yet something about his eyes made her take a small step forward. He smiled softly and offered her a piece of bread. She took it cautiously, her hands trembling. She had not eaten a meal like that in days. She nibbled slowly, savoring every bite. While the man watched quietly, he asked her name gently, and she whispered it, barely above a breath. Then he asked about her day, and she hesitated, unsure if she should tell him the truth. After a pause, she found herself speaking. She told him about her father, her mother, and the stepmother who had abandoned her. She spoke about the streets, the hunger, and the cold nights. She did not expect him to listen, but he did. He nodded, never interrupting, never judging. He only listened. When she finished, there was silence for a moment. Then he handed her a small bag of food. "Eat," he said simply. She looked at him, astonished. No questions, no promises, just kindness. She took the bag with both hands, her eyes brimming with tears. It had been so long since someone had offered her something without expecting anything in return. She ate slowly, feeling the warmth of the food spread through her body. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few days, she kept returning to the park, sometimes to eat, sometimes just to sit quietly. The man noticed her and began to speak to her more. He asked about her interests, about her dreams, about the small things that had kept her going. He never forced her to talk, only listened when she wanted to. Slowly, she began to trust him. She felt safe in a way she had not felt since her father had died. One afternoon, the girl found herself telling him about her father's favorite stories, about how he used to make her laugh, and how he had taught her to be strong. She spoke freely, her voice trembling but steady. The man listened with a seriousness that made her feel understood. He did not pity her. He respected her. It was a feeling she had never experienced before. He began helping her in small ways. Sometimes he gave her warm clothes. Sometimes he guided her to places where she could find shelter for the night. He did not take control of her life. He offered support and guidance, letting her make decisions for herself. She was cautious at first, but the warmth in his eyes and the calm in his voice slowly melted her fear. She realized that there were people in the world who cared, people who could be trusted. One rainy evening, he invited her to wait inside a small cafe until the storm passed. She hesitated, feeling unworthy of such attention, but the thought of staying dry won. She entered, dripping wet, and he offered her a cup of warm milk. The small gesture made her heart swell with gratitude. For hours, they sat quietly, the rain tapping against the windows. She felt safe, almost at home, something she had not felt in months. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings became a routine. The girl began to look forward to them, not just for the food or shelter, but for the companionship. She learned that he had a family of his own once, a life filled with responsibilities, but he had also known loss. In sharing bits of his life, he showed her that everyone carried pain, but also hope. She found comfort in knowing that even those who seemed strong and untouchable could understand suffering. One day, as they sat in the park, he handed her a notebook. "Write your stories," he said softly. "Write about your days, your dreams, your fears. Keep them safe." She looked at him, confused. Why would he care about her words? But she took the notebook, feeling its weight in her hands. It was not just paper. It was a symbol of recognition, a sign that her life mattered to someone. Encouraged, she began to write in secret each night, recounting the small details of her day, the people she met, the kindness she saw, and the cruelty she endured. Writing became a way to keep herself sane, a way to understand her own emotions, and a way to imagine a life beyond the streets. She wrote about her father, her mother, the stepmother, and the little moments of hope that kept her going. Each word was a small victory, a testament to her survival. One afternoon, while wandering near a street full of shops, she saw a little boy crying. His kite had gotten stuck in a tree, and no one was helping him. Without thinking, she climbed carefully, retrieved the kite, and handed it back to him. His face lit up, and he hugged her, thanking her over and over. She smiled quietly, feeling a warmth she had not known in a long time. Small acts of kindness reminded her that despite the harsh world, good things still existed. As the days passed, her bond with the man deepened. He began introducing her to small opportunities, a chance to help at his office with minor tasks, a place to stay in a nearby shelter that was safe for children. He never forced her to accept anything, but he guided her gently, giving her choices. She began to feel a sense of stability she had not felt in years. She realized that life could be different, that survival did not always have to mean hiding and suffering. One evening, he shared a story about his childhood, about how he had lost someone he loved deeply and how that loss had shaped him. The girl listened, understanding for the first time that even those who seemed strong and wealthy could feel pain and fear. She realized that her own suffering had value, that it connected her to others who had walked similar paths. The shared vulnerability made her feel less alone, more human, and more capable of trusting again. The girl's days slowly began to change. She learned to look forward to mornings not with fear, but with cautious hope. She explored the city with a sense of curiosity rather than dread. She began speaking to other children, sharing small lessons she had learned about survival, kindness, and courage. Her confidence grew, not because the world had become easier, but because she had found someone who believed in her, who saw her strength and her potential. Then one day, he asked her to come with him to a place that was quiet and safe, somewhere she could rest without fear of being chased away. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him fully. But the look in his eyes reminded her of all the times he had helped her without asking for anything in return. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath, and followed him. It was the first time she had allowed herself to believe that someone could care for her purely out of kindness. As they walked together, she felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She had spent so long on her own, believing that no one would ever care, that kindness was rare and fleeting. But with him, she began to imagine a life where she could be safe, where she could learn, grow, and perhaps even be loved. It was a small spark, but for the first time. She allowed herself to hope. By the time the sun set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, the girl realized something profound. Life on the streets had taught her resilience, courage, and compassion. But it had also shown her that even in the darkest times, fate could bring unexpected moments of light. The man sitting beside her, offering food, warmth, and understanding, was that light. She did not yet know how much he would change her life, but she knew one thing: she was no longer completely alone. As night fell, she curled up in a safe place for the first time in months, holding the small notebook close to her chest. She whispered quietly to herself, promising to survive, to learn, and to embrace the hope she had found. And as she drifted off to sleep, the city around her seemed a little less harsh, a little more welcoming. because she had discovered that even a single act of kindness could change the course of her life forever. The girl slowly began to see her life change in small ways. The man who had noticed her on the park bench continued to guide her, not with harsh instructions, but with gentle encouragement. He never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do, but he offered choices that opened doors she had long believed were closed. For the first time in months, she began to feel a sense of safety, not just for a day or an hour, but for the future she could imagine. He arranged for her to stay in a small, safe room near his office, a place where she could rest without fear of the night. It was simple, but it had a bed, blankets, and warmth. She remembered the nights on cold streets, the rain soaking her clothes, and the hunger that made her stomach ache. Compared to those nights, this place felt like a palace. She still clutched her father's photograph each night, but now she did so with a feeling of hope rather than despair. He also ensured she could continue her education. She had missed months of school while struggling on the streets, and the thought of returning to a classroom made her nervous. But he encouraged her, reminding her that learning could be a way to protect herself and build a future. Slowly, she began attending classes again, shyly at first, then with growing confidence. Her teachers noticed her determination and resilience. She was quiet, polite, and careful, but there was a spark in her eyes, a quiet strength that could not be ignored. At the same time, he made sure she learned about life in small, practical ways. He taught her how to manage money, how to take care of herself, and how to make decisions. He did not overwhelm her with lessons, but shared them naturally, allowing her to grow at her own pace. She began to understand that she was no longer completely helpless. She had choices, skills, and a mind capable of learning and understanding, even as she grew stronger. She never forgot the streets or the hunger she had endured. She often returned to the market to help others, to give leftover food to children she saw struggling, and to offer comfort to those who seemed lost. Her own suffering had taught her empathy, and she never wanted anyone to feel the hopelessness she had felt. She became quiet, thoughtful, and careful with words, yet generous in action. People who knew her began to notice the difference. There was something about her that drew kindness and respect. Over time, the bond between the girl and the man deepened. She began to trust him completely, not out of fear or necessity, but because he had shown her consistent care. He was there when she struggled, listening patiently. He was there when she succeeded, quietly proud, but never boastful. And gradually, she realized that she did not just feel safe with him, she felt cared for in a way she had never known. One evening, after a long day of school and errands, she returned to her room to find a small gift waiting for her, a book of stories. He had left it with a note that said, "For your imagination, and to remind you that stories can take you anywhere." She held the book close, feeling a wave of emotion. It was not just a gift, it was recognition, an acknowledgement that she deserved joy, learning, and wonder. She began reading each night, losing herself in the tales, imagining lives different from her own, and learning about courage, kindness, and resilience. As the days passed, she noticed subtle changes in herself. She smiled more freely. She laughed when she felt joy, rather than forcing herself to hide. She began helping more actively with small tasks around the man's office, learning responsibility and gaining confidence. Each small achievement, each kind word, each moment of safety began to rebuild a life that she had once believed was impossible. One rainy afternoon, they walked together through a quiet street. She noticed how calm he remained despite the storm, holding an umbrella over her while the rain poured down. She realized how much he cared, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. She felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of gratitude and trust that was new and powerful. She realized that she had begun to rely on him not for survival alone, but for guidance, understanding, and even love, the kind of love that was protective, patient, and kind. Her education progressed, and she began dreaming about the future in ways she had never allowed herself before. She imagined becoming someone who could help others, someone strong and confident, someone who could make choices without fear. The thought of a future where she was not afraid, where she was valued, became increasingly real. Each day spent learning, each day spent growing, was a step away from the despair of the streets. He also shared parts of his own life with her. He told her about losses he had endured, about loneliness that had once consumed him, and about how he had learned to find hope in unexpected places. Listening to him, she realized that even those who seemed strong and wealthy had struggles. She began to understand that life was complex, filled with challenges and kindness alike, and that her experiences on the streets had prepared her for resilience and empathy. With his guidance, she began to build small routines that gave her stability. She woke up each morning with purpose, went to school, helped with small errands, and returned to her safe room at night. She journaled regularly, documenting her feelings, her hopes, and her small achievements. Writing became a way to process the past and imagine the future. She wrote about her father, about the stepmother, about the streets, and about the kindness she had encountered. Each word strengthened her resolve and helped her understand that her life had meaning. One evening, after school, they returned to the park where they had first met. The girl sat quietly, watching the sun set, feeling the warmth of the moment. He sat beside her, offering no words, only presence. And in that silence, she realized something profound. She had begun to trust again. It's not just the world, but people, and most importantly, herself. She had grown stronger, braver, and more capable. The streets had taught her survival, but he had taught her to live. Her bond with him continued to grow. He celebrated her small victories, encouraged her to take risks, and comforted her during moments of fear. They began to spend more time together, sharing stories, walking in the quiet streets, and sometimes simply sitting in silence. Each interaction was a lesson in patience, kindness, and love. The girl began to understand that love was not just an emotion, but a series of actions that created safety, trust, and growth. She also began to notice changes in herself. She was more confident in speaking with others, more willing to take chances, and more capable of expressing her thoughts and feelings. The streets had forced her to survive, but now she was learning to thrive. She laughed more freely, helped others more actively, allowed herself to imagine a life that was full of possibilities. One night, as they sat by a small fountain in the quiet park, he handed her a key. It was for a small room he had arranged for her in a nearby safe house. "It's yours," he said gently. "A place you can call your own, where you can be safe and grow." The girl held the key tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she realized that she had a home again, a real home, not just a shelter. It was a place where she could rest, dream, and become the person she wanted to be. Over the following weeks, she settled into the safe house. She decorated it with small things she found, hung her father's photograph, and arranged her few belongings carefully. She began to feel a sense of pride in her space, a sense of control over her own life that she had never experienced before. Each night, she went to bed with a feeling of safety, knowing that she was no longer alone. The man continued to support her in every way, offering guidance, encouragement, and gentle care. He helped her navigate the challenges of school, of relationships, and of life in general. But he never forced his help upon her. He offered it, and she chose to accept it. That choice, small as it seemed, gave her a sense of autonomy and power. She realized that she could make decisions for herself, that her life was no longer dictated solely by fear or circumstance. As months passed, her confidence grew. She excelled in school, formed friendships cautiously but meaningfully, and began to explore her own talents. She wrote stories, helped others, and began dreaming in ways she had never allowed herself before. Each small success, each kind word, each safe night in her room was a building block in her life. She had survived the streets, and now she was learning to thrive, guided by someone who had believed in her when the world had turned its back. And in this process, she began to feel something she had never felt before: love. Not the simple affection of a child or the fleeting kindness of strangers, but a deep, protective, caring love that grew quietly over time. She did not understand it fully, but she felt it in the way he listened to her, the way he celebrated her victories, the way he offered guidance without judgment. She realized that love could heal, guide, and nurture in ways that survival alone never could. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging. She belonged somewhere, to someone who valued her, respected her, and cared for her. She realized that she was no longer defined by the streets, by hunger, by the cruelty she had endured, or by the abandonment of her stepmother. She was defined by her strength, her courage, and the care she had received from someone who saw her worth. And as she lay down each night in her safe room, she held her father's photograph, whispered stories of her day, and allowed herself to dream freely. She knew challenges would come, but she also knew that she had a guide, a protector, and a love that would help her face anything. For the first time, she truly believed that life could be full of hope, kindness, and possibility. Her past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear, and now, with guidance, care, and love, she was beginning to live. The girl had found safety, growth, and the unspoken bond of a protector who loved her. And in that love, she found not just security, but the courage to imagine a life far brighter than the darkness she had endured. The girl woke up to sunlight streaming through the small window of her safe room. It had been months since she had slept in a proper bed, and yet the memory of the streets still lingered in her mind. She hugged her father's photograph tightly, whispering a quiet promise to herself. Life had given her a chance to heal, to grow, and to rebuild. But even as she felt safer and stronger, there was a small part of her that wondered what had become of her past. She had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear. She had learned kindness, resilience, and trust. Yet the stepmother, who had left her on the streets, still haunted her thoughts. One afternoon, while helping the man who had become her guardian with some errands, she mentioned the stepmother cautiously. She wanted closure, but feared what the truth might reveal. He listened carefully and assured her that they could face the situation together. They decided to find out what had happened, not out of revenge, but to finally bring justice and peace to her life. The girl's heart pounded as they started their search. She felt a mix of anxiety and hope. She wanted to see the end of the chapter that had caused her so much pain. After several days of inquiries and careful planning, they discovered that the stepmother had moved to another city. Rumors suggested that she had left her new home in disarray, leaving people around her frustrated with her cruelty. She had attempted to maintain an image of kindness, but those who had worked with her quickly saw the truth. The girl listened, her heart racing. She realized that the stepmother's actions had consequences, even if they had come slowly. She felt a small relief knowing that the woman who had caused her so much suffering could no longer harm her directly. The man who had become her protector held her hand gently, assuring her that she was safe. "You've faced so much already," he said softly. "What matters now is that you have a life full of possibilities, not fear." The girl nodded, feeling tears fill her eyes. It was the first time she felt a true sense of justice, not through punishment, but through the natural course of truth. The stepmother could not erase her life, her strength, or the love she had found. In the weeks that followed, the girl began to embrace the full extent of her new life. She focused on her education, determined to learn as much as she could. Each day at school was no longer frightening but exciting. She participated in class, asked questions, and slowly built friendships. The social world that had seemed so distant and harsh began to open up to her. She discovered that kindness and trust existed not just in one person, but in many small interactions. Each smile, each word of encouragement, simple act of respect reinforced the belief that she belonged in the world. At home, she found joy in small routines. She organized her room carefully, hung her father's photograph on the wall, and decorated the space with little treasures she had collected. She began to write regularly in her notebook, chronicling her experiences, her feelings, and her dreams. Writing became a way to understand herself and to preserve the lessons she had learned. Each entry reminded her that she had survived, that she could continue to thrive. The bond with her guardian deepened further. He celebrated her successes, comforted her during moments of doubt, and encouraged her to pursue her interests. He guided her without controlling her, letting her make her own choices while providing wisdom when needed. She began to understand that trust and love could coexist with independence. She was no longer just a girl surviving the streets. She was a young person, learning to live fully and confidently. One day, they attended a small community event together. She saw children playing freely, families laughing, and neighbors helping one another. The girl felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She realized that life could be beautiful, full of warmth and connection. The memories of abandonment still existed, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to navigate pain with resilience and to embrace hope without fear. Her guardian began introducing her to new experiences gradually. She visited libraries, learned about art, and explored nature. Each experience expanded her understanding of the world and herself. She discovered talents and passions that had been dormant, shaped by years of hardship. He encouraged her to pursue these interests, reminding her that her life was not limited by her past. She began to imagine a future where she could help others, just as she had been helped. During this time, the girl received a letter from a distant relative she had never known. They had learned of her situation and wanted to reconnect. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she was ready to face more unknowns. But with her guardian's support, she met them. They welcomed her with warmth and curiosity, not judgment or pity. The encounter helped her realize that family could extend beyond blood, encompassing those who truly cared and respected her. She began to see that her life could be filled with supportive connections, not just solitude and fear. The girl also began helping other children in need. She shared her knowledge of survival, kindness, and resilience, guiding them quietly without seeking attention. Her experiences gave her empathy and insight, allowing her to connect with those who were struggling. She realized that her journey, though painful, had given her the ability to make a difference in the lives of others. Each small act of guidance, each comforting word, reinforced her belief in the power of compassion. Months passed, and the girl grew stronger in body, mind, and spirit. She excelled academically, formed meaningful friendships, and discovered talents that inspired her confidence. She began to dream of higher education, of travel, and of creating a life where she could help people like herself. The streets that had once been her prison now seemed like a distant memory, a shadow that reminded her of how far she had come. Her guardian continued to play an important role in her life, but she had also begun to rely on her own abilities. She learned to make decisions, solve problems, and navigate challenges independently. He encouraged this growth, celebrating her independence while offering support when needed. The girl realized that true care meant empowering someone to stand on their own while providing safety and guidance. One afternoon, they visited a quiet garden together. The girl sat by a fountain, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the months on the streets, the cold nights, and the fear that had once consumed her. She remembered the small acts of kindness that had sustained her: a piece of bread from a stranger, a warm blanket, a listening ear. She realized that these moments had built the foundation for the life she was now creating. Her guardian joined her silently, sitting beside her on the bench. They watched the water ripple gently, the sun reflecting softly on the surface. For the first time in a long time, the girl felt complete peace. She understood that the past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had the power to shape her future, to live with dignity, and to embrace love and kindness. Then came the day when she officially received legal protection and recognition from her guardian. It was a quiet ceremony, but it meant the world to her. For the first time, she had a true home, a secure life, and the knowledge that she would never be abandoned again. She felt tears fill her eyes as she held her guardian's hand, realizing that their bond was not just one of necessity, but of deep trust, care, and unspoken love. With this new sense of stability, the girl began planning for her future. She continued her studies diligently, knowing that education would be the key to independence and empowerment. She dreamed of helping other children who faced challenges similar to her own, imagining programs and support networks that could provide safety and guidance. She wanted to give back, to turn her past hardships into tools for creating hope for others. The girl also nurtured personal growth. She explored hobbies she had long forgotten, like drawing, reading, and writing. Each new skill and each creative moment strengthened her confidence and gave her joy. She realized that life could be more than survival. It could be full of beauty, learning, and fulfillment. The streets had taught her resilience, but her new life taught her to thrive. Her guardian continued to guide her gently, offering wisdom without imposing control. He celebrated her achievements, supported her dreams, and provided comfort during moments of doubt. The girl began to understand that love could be a powerful force for growth, shaping her life with patience and care. She felt a deep gratitude for the man who had not only saved her from the streets but had also taught her to live fully and furthered. One evening, as they walked through a quiet neighborhood, she reflected on the journey she had traveled. From the streets to safety, from fear to hope, from abandonment to love, its step had been difficult. But it had led her to a life she could finally embrace. She realized that she had transformed, not because of luck, but because of courage, resilience, and the unwavering support of someone who truly cared. As the night settled, she returned to her room, organized and cozy. She placed her father's photograph on the nightstand and wrote in her journal, chronicling the life she had rebuilt. She reflected on the hardships, the kindness, and the love that had shaped her path. She understood that while the past could never be erased, it could be honored by the strength, hope, and compassion she carried forward. The girl's story had reached a turning point. She was no longer defined by the cruelty of her stepmother or the fear of the streets. She was defined by her resilience, her kindness, and the love she had found. Her life had been saved, nurtured, and transformed by someone who believed in her when the world had turned away. She had grown from a frightened, abandoned child into a young person capable of hope, courage, and purpose. With the dawn of each new day, she looked forward to the future, knowing it was filled with possibilities. She dreamed of education, friendship, and the ability to help others. She knew that life would continue to have challenges, but she felt equipped to face them. She had learned to trust, to love, and to grow. She had discovered that even in the darkest times, kindness could change the course of a life, and love could provide the courage to dream again. The girl's journey was a testament to the human spirit, a story of survival, hope, and the transformative power of care. She had been abandoned, yet she had found a family in someone who chose to protect, guide, and love her. She had faced fear, yet she had discovered courage. She had known hunger, yet she had learned abundance in the form of trust, guidance, and opportunity, and in the quiet moments of reflection. She understood the ultimate truth. Life had given her a second chance, a chance to live fully, to dream freely, and to build a future not defined by her past, but by the strength, kindness, and love she carried in her heart. She had been abandoned, but she had been found. She had been lost, but she had been guided. She had been broken, but she was now whole. Her story was not just about survival, it was about transformation. It was about the girl who had walked the streets alone, who had faced cruelty and hunger, and who had emerged stronger, wiser, and capable of love. It was about the power of one person's kindness to change a life. And as she looked toward the horizon, she knew that her life was only beginning. Filled with hope, possibility, and the promise of a future she had once thought impossible.